Well, thank you very much, and good morning from my side here at the Univention Summit 2021. And it's a very unusual summit, and I look at the clock and we're even a bit ahead of time, so maybe I can even expand a bit, which is very pleasing to me. And we don't have any public, so we're in a very specific situation. And when preparing the presentation, I always thought of a saying that I heard when I was young in the last century, where everybody said we would like to welcome the spectators at their devices at home. And I think there's a certain analogy which is new. That is TV broad entertainment that happened on the large stages brought this home to you, home to the people, and internet brought work home to people. So now via internet we've got the possibility to work remotely. These possibilities have been existing over a long period of time and they were used, but now with the pandemics we were forced and pushed to use these and to create new possibilities. And what had been prepared maybe in the work life hit the educational sphere in an unprepared manner and without having appropriate concepts. And there were major challenges that our customers had to meet. So we need far more remote services in the UCS existing installations. There was far less demand on the intranet. The expansion was on services that are accessible from home, that are web-based, and that were needed. And in the roadmap last year, we reacted to this and said, okay, the development for the UCS5, the new major release, has to step back because we will focus on the things which will allow UCS4 as a stable release for the users out there to support them in meeting the challenges, the increased challenges that they met, and to really allow them to really have the benefit and the use that they need at work as well as at school. And Peter has already shown you that due to this pressure to create more systems and more possibilities, we've seen that the growth increased significantly. We had a doubling of user numbers on UCS systems in the enterprise area. That is where customers develop projects together with us. We even had 2.5-fold development plus 150%. And in education, we saw a very strong growth. UCS School, there the user numbers tripled. And especially looking at the public perception, where one is always looking at where things are not working, it's really a pity that all these people who very committedly are working on these changes and on environments that are actually working and on all these spheres where remote learning really functions very well. I must say it's really a pity that one is only focusing in public on the individual cases where things are not working. Okay, what was the outcome on features and products? Here a small selection, and Nico Gulden will tell you more later in his presentation about the changes that we have developed. As we already announced, single sign-on, OpenID Connect Ensemble will happen, so we will put more into the single sign-on concepts. In UCS School, we have released a very interesting feature that is with Kelvin API and ID Connector, new apps which now allow different UCS at school installations to operate them in parallel with the same identities. This is very useful in state portals where maybe identities have been managed on a state level, and if there are specific municipalities which would like to offer specific services, then can I go to the state and allow for the same through the same login to provide additional services. With regard to connector integration, we have released further things. So we've now got a SoapNX connector for Open Exchange, which is not working on UCS. We have various improvements for existing connectors, so Active Directory connector. We have additional functions, additional configurations with Microsoft 365 connector had been expanded, and many other further developments in this area. An interesting new feature is also happening in self-service, and self-service is the module in UCS which allows states to have their own specific participants to, for example, get a new password or change settings. And now I can also activate, for example, that specific accounts can be established. As an administrator, I can then decide this is a functionality, for example, that can be opened, and then you can decide on the characteristics that such an account can have, which services can be used, and the user can then generate an email, then password. And this is an important component for the project with SUSE and SUSE image services, which will be presented by SUSE a little later today. Okay, what we also announced on the last summit was that we work on new functionalities in our portal. The portal is been opened as a preview release, and this is a frame for the access to apps. So the preview portal created the possibility last year that apps can be integrated more strongly, and in-house we improved self-service as well as single sign-on in order to integrate these into the portal, but also apps can also be shown as part of the portal directly, that is. And in parallel, looking at the tests and the expansions which took place in the projects, we massively worked on the scalability of the portal and the IDP, so that the peak burdens which we had, where sometimes tens of thousands of pupils and teachers, for example, punctually at 8 a.m. would try to sign in, so that we now make sure that these loads are really cushioned through an improved use of hardware. As a further integration, we presented first projects in cooperation with partners. For example, the integration of Open Exchange and our own IDP for access to files. And these integrations for Open Exchange and OCloud, all these products have reached market maturity and have been published. So today I can go, for example, and use the single sign-on of UCS, and within Open Exchange I can also use file storage systems like OwnCloud in Open Exchange without forcing users to use specific apps, or without users having to register again or having any breaks in the UI. And for the time being, this is happening on the WebDev protocol, but I've got a UI in Open Exchange and an UI in OwnCloud, for example, in the file server. And the next step, we are now working together with Open Exchange and OwnCloud, and also now Nextcloud, to eliminate this break in UI, so that there will be only one file taker, so only one graphic element, which will then allow me to access my files, and using additional, where I can also use additional functions like my favorites. And this UI element will then, OwnCloud or Open Exchange will be used to have access to files or also download files. And the whole integration has the enormous advantage that me as a user, I stay in my well-known environment, and that I've got clear responsibilities as to which of my services will be used for which app. And this is what we're currently working on, and I would expect that the release will come within the next months. Okay, so these were things that is looking back to UCS4. This is what we've done to support our users in these change conditions in 2020. But we did not only work on UCS4, but also on UCS5. And here I brought a slide which shows the numbers of commits in the stores repository over recent months. So you see a lot happened. And the focus of UCS5 is still on a renewal of the basics. So the Debian basis had been changed, this Debian basis, sorry, but we also had been working massively on the migration from Python 2 to Python 3, just to give a bit of context. For those who know about the software development at Univention know that we use a lot of Python for our own developments, and the programming language Python had a generation shift between Python 2 to Python 3, and this forces us on the one hand, but also offers the opportunity for us to look at each individual point, asking ourselves, how do we want to do it correctly? And this is work that happened last year, and in December this was released in a beta release. So a large part of our core modules is now running on Python 3, and this is something which happened well under a hood, so to speak. It didn't change the functionalities, but it increased the capabilities of the whole stack. And then there were a lot of other details that we put closer to Debian, and we will hear more about this on the presentation on USC5. And what I brought along are a few screenshots, because we also have significant changes in the design of UCS5. And maybe some of you have already seen a few of these in the previews or in the beta version. And the screenshots that I show you are from the beta release from December. You can just update this, then you will see where we are right now with this. And in the redesign, well, we have used a dark scene. This is how we call it. So it's a dark but very clear and uncluttered look and feel of UCS. And this is something that we will have for all components. So here you see the portal. The portal has a much clearer view, and it has much more functions, as you see. So here at the bottom you see, and I just took the logos, our sponsors logos, and here at the bottom you see the possibility to create folders. So within the portal you can collect applications and put them together. So with regard to the look and feel and the use, it's a bit like a smartphone. So I collect icons and the elements that I would like to show, and thus I can present far more content in a much clearer way. The dark theme is also applied for the other applications. So here the new App Center. So we also made sure that it's really clear, uncluttered, and here you see the current UI for the user management. And in the redesign, we also paid attention to the fact that all the different prerequisites are collected. So for UCS4, the situation, you've got a customizing of the portal of the self-service, but then you have to address different elements. In UCS5, the customizing and the look and feel, the theming will take place at one site. And with a dark theme here, we will also offer a light theme version, which is much lighter and which is color-wise far closer to UCS4. Okay, this is what we are planning with UCS5. So with regard to UCS5, we had the beta release in December, as I said. Then we have other topics which we presented later by Arvid Requite, and we will then have a further release later this year. But we also, in February, but we also wanted to focus on the modules that we have in UCS and how to use these. And some of you might have seen, well, I always have these yellow boxes here, and the yellow boxes are representing the components that I'm talking about when I present, for example, UCS4. I still collect these. So what are the elements of a Univention corporate server? Well, at a core point, we have have identity and access management. Then we have these rights, the users, the authorities, who's allowed to do what. Next to this, we have the single sign-on, the identity provider. That is the point where one checks whether somebody who wants to access the system is really the person who he or she is supposed to be, so password or two-factor identification. So we've got a lot of services and integrations. So this box actually consists of different individual modules, so the connectors to the other world. We've got Samba 4, for example, as a representative of compatible service for active service, but we also have DNSP services. On the other side, we also have an integration towards end user, like self-service, so I can go there and manage my own personal data and contact data, additional ones. So this is, so to speak, the easy access to all the services. So these are the core elements that we develop at Univention to allow access and integration to these IT services. And this is what we are doing right now on a Linux-based software. And this would then run on a hypervisor or sometimes directly on hardware. And as Peter has already said, this is something that we decided years ago that we're doing and that we think is a good idea because it's an easy pre-configured entry into all these services on the open source module. But for large projects, this often leads to a situation where UCS looks like a foreign body. In infrastructures like mainframe infrastructures, there are existing Linux infrastructures, they've got existing Linux softwares, and on these we would like to offer those modules without other clients underneath, and this is something that we're actively working on. And here the objective is to use hyperscaler architectures, cloud infrastructures, so Kubernetes open source infrastructures, which should be supported as the cloud stack network. For example, these should then be supported and implemented, and these structures and these elements will incrementally offered as container-based services. So the life of these yellow boxes will turn into a set of containers. So how does that look like in the overall product development? So we have the containerized core services as we have them in the product stack implemented, and we'll be working on these and will expand features. For example, colleagues are currently actively working on improving role and authorization set, which then will be used for UCS Core as well as for UCS at School. And these modules will initially be made available as a container, but then create the possibility, once you have a container-based center, that you can then take them and integrate them. And these modules will then be supplemented, as you're used to, by additional services, additional functions and services. We will also have an app center in future, which allows you to select and install and roll out these services. And if I want to, I can also do this on a Linux-based software appliance like Univention Corporate Server, as it has already been known. So in future, you've got the possibility, do I use the Univention Corporate Server as before? That's my standard set. So this is something that is well pre-configured. It's easy to use. I'm fast and quickly get productive within my infrastructure. So this is an offer that we will continue to provide. But you can also say, okay, I need to scale into a specific direction. I need individual configuration. And my mainframe center is based on Linux or Kubernetes. Then you can also use the containers for an individual approach. Okay. So I hope that this provides a first insight into what we would like to offer. And I exactly kept within my 20 minutes limit. So I've got a possibility to change to the speaker corner, and that is a possibility that you should have on the lower left-hand corner of your screen. So I'll change the room. I'll be there in a couple of minutes. So if you have any questions to the topics, then we can discuss them. But but there's also a presentation on UCS4 and UCS5 later on, and also specific presentations on individual components. I'm looking forward to your feedback, and if you feel like it, then download UCS5 and see for yourself what we have come up with. Thank you very much for your attention.